Warning, the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast is a Christian program that may contain graphic descriptions of death, burial, and resurrection, and may not be suitable for those who deny the God who created them. Repentance and faith is advised. You're listening to the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast, the podcast that's safe for the whole family.
Unless your family contains professing atheists.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast, video, YouTube channel, Bible Thumping Wingnut. I'm the BTWN guy. Started this YouTube channel focusing on, I started the YouTube channel 7.5 years ago. 7.5 years ago, the goal was to connect with other Christian men and women and be an encouragement. The Lord's done a lot in my life, personally, a lot of things. And I thought, hey, you know what? I'm 42 years old. I was in my 40s. I don't remember. Can't do the math. 46, probably, somewhere around there. I was like, hey, you know what? The Lord's taught me a lot, and I'm not a minister or a pastor, but I'd like to get on the internet and encourage folks with their walk with the Lord, share some of my experiences, and I started doing that, and immediately this odd group who said that, oddly enough, that God doesn't exist. They insisted that I prove that God exists before I go any further. So you know what? I took a little bit of a change in direction, a massive change in direction, because the professing atheists, they started subscribing and watching my videos. So you know what? I said, hey, if the non-believers are going to be the ones watching, I might as well talk to them, and I might as well come up with a catchy name. And I chose Bible Thumping Wingnut, and thus the YouTube channel. And then the rest is history after that. We started a podcast, then a podcast network, and now even events. Actually, we do one event a year. The Builders Summit. This year, Builders Summit. Here's a mug. Limited edition mug. There's only 8 of these. If you see somebody on a video with one of these, they're one of 8 people with a Builders Summit mug. This year, Builder Summit is for Christian men only, and it is November 13, 14, and 15. More details coming soon on registration dates and all kinds of stuff. So, why do I tell you about how we started the Bible Thumping Wingnut? Because I'm going to be addressing that topic today, addressing atheism today. And you can tell by the title. What did I title it? If Hitler Met Dillahunty. And we're going to be looking at this debate that Matt Dillahunty did with Glenn Shrivener. And I know some other people have done a little bit of a critique, but obviously, until I do a critique, no one has done a meaningful critique. So we can look forward to, you can now see a truly meaningful critique because I am doing it. And if you have been watching this YouTube channel, you know I am speaking. What's the word? Anyway, you know what I mean. You know why I'm saying that. I'm going to jump right into this. This debate happened on the Unbelievable show. Justin Brierly is the guy over there. He's going to be the moderator. It's not as much a debate as it is a conversation. So it flowed. Okay. I love reading comments. It's hard for me to read comments when I'm live. but I do. But we have the professing atheist crowd has showed up, a few of them. Somebody said Dillahunty did very well. So I'm glad I have a little bit of a live audience here, because let's examine, did Dillahunty do a good job? Now, if it's a debate or a topic to be discussed, there are the parameters that are agreed upon ahead of time. I know this. If there's going to be a discussion or a debate, there's going to be a thesis. Okay? The thesis is, can atheism deliver a better world? Which obviously is confusing from the beginning, because within the atheist structure, there is no better or worse. There just is what is. But that is something that the atheist would take issue with me saying that. But we're going to look at that. But when Matt Slick debated Matt Dillahunty in Texas a few years back, I was involved in a little bit of the planning. I went to it. Let me take that back. I was not involved in the planning at all. But I knew when the plans were being made, when the negotiations were happening, I knew what thesis ideas were presented and which ones which one Matt Slick wanted, which ones Matt Dillahunty wanted. And it took quite some time to come up with a thesis for the debate, because it's very important to have a thesis that both groups agree on, so that you can either defend or destroy the concept. You can be for it or against it. So it needs to be clear. And in this discussion, they agreed on the concept: can atheism deliver a better world? Can atheism deliver a better world? And so let's see. This is at the 15-minute mark, 15:30, and we'll just listen to Matt Dillahunty speak about this.
The simple answer to your question, which can atheism lead us to a better world? No, it can't.
Nope, it can't. Why? Why show up for a discussion? Seriously. It can't. No, it can't. End of discussion. Do I get a check for showing up here, or what? The debate is over. The discussion is it's already decided. No, atheism cannot deliver a better world. And you might say, well, I already made the point. Matt agreed on this discussion. Matt agreed to go on Unbelievable and discuss, can atheism deliver a better world? And he goes on and says, within the first 15 minutes, nope, we can't. And why would you conclude, well, Matt Dillahunty did a great job? Strange. The next clip I want to play, I've got a bunch of them, and we're going to jump to the next one. This is at the 44:15 mark. Let me load this up a little bit here. There we go. 44:15 mark.
That when I advocate for secular humanist principles, when I do that I'm basically taking the principles that you see in Christianity and just removing God from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So clearly you can do that.
You can do that, but on what grounds now is every human being in the image of God, or now in this new updated term, is every human being now included in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights?
This is the thing that I keep running up against is I have yet to find anybody presenting an objection to secular morality that is in any way solved by appealing to a religious one. The big thing that you get to is, well, what's the foundational source and why should I care about it? This is where when Sam writes Moral Landscape and people are like, well, you haven't fully explained well-being. Of course, we haven't. I mean, this is the process where we're continuing to discover things. Well, why should anybody care about well-being is the big question that Sam always gets asked. And that this question also applies to why should anybody care about what a God says? And this,
instead of answering the question, why is human life valuable at all? He doesn't answer the question. He just turns it around and says, instead of being honest and saying, in atheism, there's no reason to believe that. No reason to believe that all people have value. Instead of giving any kind of an argument, he turns it around and says, well, prove that God exists. Prove that God exists.
This is one of the things where whether or not there's a God, I don't necessarily see any evidence when I look at Christianity in particular, at least the way I understood it when I was a Christian, that there's a God who has human interests at heart. It's humans who have human interests at heart. So not only would secular humanism stand with regard to Occam's razor, but the thing that we're appealing to is the very thing that we're seeking to do, which is we care about us. Why do we care about us? We care about us because we're us. Now, when you add in the God of Christianity, you get the notion that, no, God's got a plan. You are a part of that plan. And okay, he loves you and he's making a place to either torture you or rescue you too. And he can serve as a foundation that we can point to so that we don't have to point to ourselves. But nowhere in there is there any sort of guarantee that there either is a God or B, that God has the actual best interests of humans at heart. It's just an appeal that God understands these things better than we do. And so when it seems like God doesn't have the best interests of humans at heart, that's just our failure to understand it, which is really fallacious reasoning.
Where in the Bible does it say that God has humans' best interests in mind, in a general sense? I don't think it does. I believe God has in mind revealing himself and bringing glory to himself as he reveals himself to us. That's what I believe that the Bible teaches. Not that God has the best interest of man. It's not, it's, the Arminian folks might say that. The Provisionists, the Latent Flowers group might say, God's first and foremost concerned about human beings. But no, I don't believe that at all. God's first and foremost concerned with revealing himself and glorifying himself. And he does that by the way he interacts with humans.
Except that Christianity is about God the human. I mean, foundationally, Christianity is Christ. It's foundationally God the Son has become God our brother. We've just celebrated Christmas. It's the time at which the Word became flesh, which is just a stunning religious idea that is found nowhere else. Disgusting to my Muslim friends. You know, it's disgusting to the Greco-Roman mind. And yet, the Christian claim uniquely is that God took flesh and even became a single cell in Mary's womb, became the weak and despised thing for the sake of all weak and despised things. And I think from there you get the principle that humanity in and of itself has a dignity because God has so dignified it. Otherwise, it's us elevating humanity to a certain, position. Why should we elevate humanity to a certain position? Why should there be such a thing as human exceptionalism?
Why shouldn't there be?
Okay, that's what I wanted to get to. So the Christian man, although his wrapping up of the whole concept of what Christianity is about is kind of a watered down and lacks the gospel, but I guess you could get the gospel through it. And I did not watch Dr. White's critique of him. I did watch the beginning of Dr. White's critique of this because somebody sent it to me and said, "Hey Tim, Dr. White is making an argument for critiquing other apologists. You should go listen to it. So I did. I went and listened to it. And yeah, Dr. White made a great argument for why it is okay for one Christian apologist to critique another Christian apologist. Yours truly came on some fire for doing exactly that, which was why somebody sent the clip to me, and that's kind of a side note for those of you who know what's going on with that. That was interesting to see. But okay, so the Christian guy says, why assume human exceptionalism? What is human exceptionalism? Human exceptionalism is the idea, the belief, the understanding that humans are the most important animals on earth. Humans are most important, to be most valued. That's what they're talking about, human exceptionalism. And the Christian says, hey, on what foundation should we say that human exceptionalism is a concept we should embrace? And Dillahunty says, why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Like, why would we? Why would we at all? And Dillahunty's only response is, why shouldn't we? So let me press down on this concept of human beings having value, more value than your cat, your dog, your earthworm, whatever. Why do humans have more value? What if you exclude God, if you pretend that God doesn't exist, and you live your life as if you believe God does not exist, why would you believe that humans are any more important than an earthworm? We all came from the same thing. We all came from stardust. We all came from the singularity. Everything. Some of us became cell phones. Some particles became cell phones. Some became mugs. Some became dogs and cats. Some became tables. Some became dirt. Some became water. But we became humans. So what? So what? What value is humanity? And what value is... Why does it matter? Why does anything matter? Why... We can't even make the argument that we should survive. It's all just complete assertion, just asserting things with no reason at all. Perhaps we'll get to more on that. Let me go to the next clip that I wanted to play.
Do people have to all recognise this foundation in order for it to be the foundation?
No, people don't need to recognise that 2 + 2 = 4 for it to be the case that 2 + 2 = 4, and for you to go to your grave proclaiming that 2 + 2 = 4. Even if the whole world said it was otherwise, then 2 + 2 would still equal 4. People don't need to recognise a moral truth to be a moral truth for it to be moral.
They do if you're talking about a moral system. If you want to create, computer code and get people to start programming in it, you've got to be able to convince them about ones and zeros.
Yeah.
So 2 + 2 = 4 isn't even in the same ballpark of there is a God. It's either true or it's not, but it's not a foundation for something. If you're talking about a moral system, the true foundation is agreement on what the foundation is, that the three of us care about human beings. And then we can start our...
Wait, why throw in caring about human beings? Dillahunty, interestingly enough, here is making the argument that moral foundations, if you're going to have a moral system, all we have to do is agree that it's good or bad, and it is good or bad. Huge problem with that. Huge problem with that. So that is actually a fallacy, is it not? There's some fallacy of if the most people believe it, then it's got to be true. That's a fallacy right there.
Arguing about how much we care and where there's going to be conflicts and everything else. But as long we can't do any of that until we agree on that foundation. And if Glenn's foundation is there's a God at the bottom of this and he can't demonstrate that, then we're not even going to get started on solving the problem.
That's not what 2 plus.
First of all, everybody knows that God exists. Everybody does. God has told us the only way we know that anything is true is through Scripture. And Scripture tells us in Romans chapter 1, everybody knows that God exists. And Matt says, until you prove that fact that God exists, then we have no foundation for anything. And I would say God does exist, and until you submit to that fact, you have no foundation for anything. He doesn't have the foundation if he rejects the truth about God.
2 equals 4 is the analog of, in this conversation, 2 plus 2 equals 4 is the analog of all human beings are worthy of provision and protection. All of them. Right? Would you agree with that? All members of the human family, no matter what their achievements, no matter what their attributes, all members of the human family are worthy of all provision and protection.
I have no idea.
And the atheists think that Matt Dillahunty is worthy of their money. People give this guy money. This guy makes his living traveling around the world pretending that God doesn't exist, making foolish arguments. And his opinion is, his understanding is that he does not know if all human beings have value. How is he even doing debates? I titled this, If Hitler Met Dillahunty. The next clip that I have, we're going to get into that.
Law, even though we're near the end of the program. Why was it wrong for Hitler and the Nazis to, euthanize disabled people and gay people and people that they felt were outside of their circle of who they considered to be human? What was the kind of...
I'm not convinced they considered them outside the circle of what they considered to be human. They had a view that these were somehow inferior humans. I think they would all acknowledge they were human, just that they were somehow inferior or less diverging. Yeah, race. Things like that.
The master race.
So it's one of those things where people say...
Because a lot of people would say Hitler was wrong about a fact there, whereas from what I'm wondering, and we're getting to the issue of, is there this objective moral value to humanity? And in a sense,
it reminds me of the people who argue that, hey, slavery is really good for the slave owners. And so if you're a slave owner, you can look at this and say, hey, slavery is a good thing because it benefits me. The problem is that when you look at the larger picture, it's actually not necessarily good for the slave owners. And beginning to recognize that every member of society affects potentially every other member fundamentally changes, and it shifts our in-group, out-group dynamic, so that when Hitler goes after the Jews for whatever religious reasons he had, for whatever superior, uber guy reasons he had, that's fundamentally different from whether or not killing them makes society worse or better. And it's kind of this thing of, this is what I think makes us better, which is independent from what actually makes us think better. Nobody, not Sam nor I nor anybody, is suggesting that if we begin with an agreement on well-being as a foundation, that there aren't going to be things that we think we have the right answer about and find out we were wrong.
At that stage, then, it would seem like instead of having World War II, we would have a symposium in which the Nazis would present their papers and others would present other papers, and then we'd have a panel and we'd discuss them and we'd try and thrash it out. At what stage do you say that their vision for updating, for evolving, for having a master race, at what stage do you say that is morally unjustified and therefore there is a just war that can be fought against them?
What? I don't know that there's an answer for that apart from assessing the individual situations, which is what we did.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have to rely on a God for it.
Well,
I am frustrated by that. Dillahunty continues to be asked questions and he doesn't answer them. I have to skip ahead here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've all got our different standards of what would qualify as evidence. For
Which
that
is
to be
why,
true
and
as well.
this is the thing. This is why I keep saying that I have yet to be presented with an objection from religious, an objection to secular morals that religions solve. And it's not, God could fix this. If there is a God, God could fix this just like that. Just like.
It sounds smart, doesn't it? It's the second time he said it. He said, I've never received an objection to secular morals that religion solves. I've never received an objection to secular morals that religion solves. It sounds smart, and it sounds even maybe defeating to the Christian argument. But how do you solve secular morals? How do you solve right and wrong? The statement, from a godless perspective, it's incoherent. How does he have rights and wrongs? How can he have any foundation? He doesn't. He's saying well-being is something that we should pursue. But that's just an assertion. Secular morals, apart from God, are meaningless and nothing but subjective. God doesn't solve a negative secular moral problem. God is the sole standard from which right and wrong are defined. Let me say that again. God doesn't solve a secular moral problem, or God isn't an objection to secular morals. God is the sole standard for which right and wrong can be defined. Period. I've never received an objection to secular morals that religion solves. I've never heard, that's what Dillahunty says. I've never heard a secular moral position that has any footing at all, that is meaningful in any way.
Like he could have said, thou shalt not own another human being as property. Instead, he was more concerned about wearing mixed fabrics and whether or not you should eat shrimp.
Now, this of course is where Dillahunty goes for all the arguments that atheists use on Christians who are uneducated. These arguments seem to have some footing, but if you study it in the least, if you Google it, if you listen to Christian apologetics at all, these are childish. See, the thing is, an uninformed atheist talks about shrimp and fabrics. An uninformed one does. An ignorant one. Or one who is just lying. See, with an atheist, if there's an atheist that's worth anything, if their arguments are worth anything, when their argument is defeated or shown to be fallacious or shown to be false, they take it out of their tool bag if they're worth anything. Dillahunty doesn't do that. Dillahunty will go and use. He's done it. He hasn't done it on this YouTube channel, but you've seen it do it one debate after another debate. He'll have something refuted completely, and then he'll use the same argument. And it's not just Dillahunty. Your regular YouTube level atheist will use this tactic as well, but you wouldn't expect it from Dillahunty, because even those of you who follow Dillahunty, you know that what he's saying is silly and elementary.
Evidently.
I mean, it's a conversation about the old covenant that we can have, but the old covenant's called old for a very good reason. What I've been saying again and again is...
Why would there be multiple covenants? Why can't God just say, here's the way things are?
That's just the law. That's just the law. The law does say, here's the way things are. But as we've both admitted, humans get things wrong. What we need is grace. What we need is the God who is the lawgiver to actually come and save us, to actually come and forgive us for all the different ways that we get things wrong.
So I don't think I need a God to come and save me or forgive me. I think I need a God to come down and demonstrate that he exists.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he did that.
The God who comes down, in the Christian sense, is the God who becomes incarnate. But a number of times, Matt, you've used the word of God being sort of a super being, or I don't know, what was the phrase you used? Anyway, a super being, which I imagine to be something kind of within the created order, and who might appear in a cloud and that sort of thing.
Are you talking about today? Because the only time I talked about super being was when we were referencing Nazis.
No, super. Anyway, forgive me.
But carry on.
God is not one more item within the created order. He is the source of being, and so for you to say why isn't God showing himself? It's a bit like Juliet saying, where is Shakespeare? Like in one sense, where isn't Shakespeare? Okay,
it's kind of the opposite of that, because in that category you have a fictional character asking where's the real.
Yeah, I wouldn't use that argumentation at all. I would say the Bible reveals to us that God did show himself to us and calls you to repent, to turn to Christ, to turn from your sin, to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins.
Real one. And this one you have the real character asking where's the fictional one.
No, but are you the fictional one?
I'm not. I'm the real one.
Yeah. That's another thing we could talk about. Dillahunty just said he is the real character. How does he know he's the real character? We've talked about that. Solipsism. That's not the right way to say it, but a philosophical problem, whether you know that you're actually a real person in a real body experiencing what you're experiencing. If God doesn't reveal that to you to be true, you don't know it. You have no reason to believe you're not dreaming, or a brain in a vat, or a computer program. We've had that argument here on this channel too.
I'm a real boy.
As far as I can tell.
Yeah. And yet you did not give life to yourself.
Isn't one of Glenn's contentions, though, in a sense, that if you're looking for evidence for God, we find it by looking at the fact that we have this intrinsic view that humans are equal, and that isn't something we can just deduce from science. Science doesn't have anything particularly to say to our moral values.
Because it's not a truth. It's not intrinsically true. It's not like 2 + 2 = 4.
It's not a mathematical truth. I mean, in terms of morality, are you an objective? Do you believe in objective moral values, or like?
Not the objective foundation, but the objective assessment with regard to the foundation. I think well-being is the best that we've come up with.
But in that sense, so science, as far as it can give us a morality, like Sam Harris says, is once we've agreed what the goal is, and then
right. If you agree on what the goal is, then you can.
There's no ultimate sort of There's no ultimate foundation saying this is the way we should all. This is the goal we should all aspire to. But presumably, Glenn, you believe there is some kind of ultimate thing that we're made for, something we're about, a grand narrative we're living in,
right?
And the fact we recognise that somehow within ourselves, evidence for God in your view.
You can make a moral argument for God's existence. Yes, I do believe God is love, and the good life is to live in love, and I believe that.
All right, I don't like that Christian argument either, but the exchange that they just had, Dillahunty makes it clear that it is not intrinsically true. It is not true like 2 + 2 = 4. It's not like a fact. Like 2 + 2 is a fact. 2 + 2 = 4 is a fact. But the concept that all humans are equal is not the same type of a truth. Isn't that where racism comes from? Isn't that what fear of other people comes from? There's something in another person. There's something about another person that makes them less. And that's what Dillahunty, of course, is left with.
So the moral argument for God's existence is not that we need some kind of arbitrary moral figure who has some whims and he will enforce them at the point of hell, and therefore it would be better if we want to live in a moral world to believe in such a God. The moral argument for God's existence is there is an objective realm of moral values. And the explanation for that objective realm of moral values is not going to be a material cause, because morals are not material things, right? Moral values are not reducible to just biological reality, and thank God for that, because biological reality is the survival of the fittest, okay? But moral values are something distinct from biological values, natural values. You cannot get from those natural values to the ethical values. You can't get from an is to an ought. And you sure can't get from preferences.
You cannot get from an is to an ought. Like that look on Dillahunty's face. That's a problem for atheists. There are no oughts. There is no should. If an atheist says, you should do this, or you ought to do that. Well, why? why would your claim that somebody should do something, why would that trump the other person feeling that they should do the opposite, or that they should ignore you? You can't get an is, you can't get an ought from an is.
To an ought. You can't get from a like to an ought.
Of course
if
you can. You can.
He just said, of course you can. Let's see what he has to say.
Always get from preferences to an ought.
No, you can only get from preferences to another preference.
Why is Dillahunty doing this? Why is he trying? This is a classical, for those of you apologists who have read and studied more than I do, you know that there's a term for this philosophical problem. All right, there's a major, and it's been studied and proven over and over again. You can't get from an is to an ought. You can't get from a preference to a should.
It just becomes another preference, just backed up with force.
The problem is, all right, we're not going to necessarily. So first of all, I don't think we disagree on.
Look at that. He was left completely speechless. Completely speechless. All right. And again, I'm baffled. People commenting on YouTube, Dillahunty did a great job. I suggest you watch it before you comment.
On the is-ought dilemma, but as soon as you get into preferences, that's the objection. The reason you can't get from an is-ought is that you have to inject a preference. It's injecting the preference that gets you to the ought. I would like to live in a world where this happens, therefore I ought to do that. Mm-hmm. The objection on the is-ought thing.
Why? If I'd like to live in a cleaner, I'd like to live in an environment where there's clean air, but I decide to smoke a pipe in the room every day. Well, I'd like it to be fresh air, but whatever, I like smoking a pipe too. So the preferences don't make shoulds either.
Thing is, this thing, if I start with the foundation of I would like to, it's not a problem with what it leads to, but why should I like
with
to?
The power, I suppose, is what I'm getting. Glenn is saying, if the person in power, say the Hitler, simply has a very different conception of what the best is for his life compared to your life, then do you have any moral, if you like, force to say you're doing something wrong? Isn't he just going with his preferences as opposed to your preferences?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. What would be that foundation?
So what is it that's up here that says those preferences are better and those preferences are worse?
What is
that?
This is the objection that's often launched.
No. Answer the question. Don't dodge it. This is a Dillahunty dodge right here. Dillahunty dodge. So the question is, what is it that you would argue that Hitler was wrong? What standard are you going to appeal to that is going to trump Hitler's belief that he should slaughter Jewish folks?
So I could sit down with Hitler. I wouldn't, because he's dead. But I could sit down with Hitler,
adjacent.
and if
All right, so this is where I come with the title for the video. If Hitler met Dillahunty. If Hitler met with Dillahunty, what would happen? Okay, that's the question. And Dillahunty is going to tell us, and I think it's important to highlight it here.
if we could find the thing that we agree about, that we care about, we can then demonstrate which one of our preferences are in conflict with that. If
He's going to try to find something he agrees with Hitler with.
because what we do as human beings is often delude ourselves, and we look at our preferences and assume they're right, but they're going to conflict with something foundational, which is basically at the beginning of that superiority to secular morality talk. I talked about how you could begin with, let's say, 3.
He's just making it up. He's just making up secular morals right now. He's going to make up his. He says there's a foundation that's going to conflict with our preferences so that we can decide what is morally best. That's what his claim is. So now he's going to say what the 3 foundations are for secular morality. And why does he pick these? Why does he pick these out of any other things other than his own subjective preference?
Foundational premises. Life is generally preferable to death. Health is generally preferable to sickness, and pleasure is generally preferable to pain. None of them are universally true. Sometimes pain is preferable. Sometimes death may be preferable, which is why I support death with dignity for people who no longer have any hope of a quality of life, and with their individual autonomy and control over their own life. But you can begin with those and you can build something. But you can start with anything. You could start with death is better than life, and what you get to is extinction.
And so? So what? What's wrong with extinction? There are a lot of people who believe humans should become extinct. Why not? Why not? Who cares?
Sure. And so if I find something, I think Hitler probably, there's the old joke, Hitler probably loved his mother too. Hitler probably valued human life, just had justifications for excluding certain others.
Right.
And you think you could reason Hitler into...
I don't know that I necessarily could.
Why wouldn't
because
he
there are
reason
people,
you into his way?
It might be.
That's the highlight of this right here. Justin Brierly asks, what makes you think that you could convince Hitler? He's like, I don't know. And then the Christian who's involved in the debate portion here says, could Hitler convince you? Dillahunty's response is, perhaps. Let me back it up a little bit. I do this with fear and trembling. Might mess it up.
It might be. I'm not saying that that's not necessarily the case. I'm saying
Hitler might be able to convince Dillahunty. That is a problem. That is a problem for Matt Dillahunty. That is a problem for atheism. That is a problem for anybody who thinks that Dillahunty has any debating skills whatsoever. Dillahunty claims that if he sat down with Hitler, Hitler might be able to convince him that he is right. Huh. That's bad.
If you can show that what your actions are and the things that you're justifying are in conflict with a foundation that you...
All right, we're going to skip ahead here. Here's the next clip I wanted to address. Uh-oh. I might have just closed one of the windows that I needed. But we'll open it when I need it.
If well-being, just very vaguely just defined, if well-being is the metric that we're using,
yeah.
And if Hitler could say, oh, we are so much better off without the disabled, you have no idea. We're soaring our industry, our numbers are through the roof.
Now, Dillahunty's getting his butt kicked time and time again in this debate, in this discussion, time and time again. And he's gonna bit of his frustration is about to come out.
Our well-being is doing incredibly well once we eliminate the sick, the weak, the handicapped. Is he right at that point?
Well, that's when you go through and you talk about what data are you looking at to define well-being, because
what data?
Yeah.
You're having that conversation about the because he's just told you I've eliminated the handicapped.
It's not like I'm no.
Okay, because it is happening right now. Okay, there is a Down syndrome population, for instance, that's being eliminated globally right now, and we're having a conversation about it. Okay, and I think it's better to have a conversation than to
man. Dillahunty is bringing forward how horrible the atheist position is. He was just asked, how can you say that Hitler was wrong? And he doesn't have an answer. And everybody in the room knows it.
To blow people up and all that sort of stuff. But it's a very live issue. I mean, it's not just the Godwin's rule.
I'm just going with the example that you say Hitler comes to me and says, you wouldn't believe how much better our society is off now that we're eliminating these people. Then you have to go back and look at it and say, okay, what have you lost? Is your society better, and are you just looking at the short term? Did you, in fact, how do you know that you didn't lose a cure for disease? How do you know that you're not worse off because it has fundamentally changed your psyche? How do you know that you're not worse off because you've lost art because you...
Who says art and all these things are good? Who says that the curing of illnesses is something that's good? Maybe it... How does he make any claim for a moral right or wrong at all?
You've lost human connection. It's not just... See, this is one of the problems that you could point out to people that are going down there. Well-being is not just what's my financial
well-being. Aren't those people's lives
this?
Worth something, even if they didn't produce a cure for cancer or great works of art? Even if they just, sat around and consumed all the resources that all the able-bodied people were doing.
If somebody sat around and did nothing but consume, I don't know how you could consider that as adding value. You have to point to something where they're adding value to society.
Is that what so they have to achieve? They have to add value. But they don't have value.
Yeah. So...
Oh, I keep going back to it. An atheist said that he thought Dillahunty did a good job. Dillahunty's saying, if you don't add value to the world, you have no value. Period. And then he's going to, man, this is why atheists should not debate morality. He's getting slaughtered in this debate.
This is what I'm saying when I say that there's no intrinsic value to it, but that I value human life, and that everybody, almost everybody.
Who's I? You, Matt Dillahunty.
I'm speaking specifically for me, but also
but if
I
someone
think
else doesn't. You try to reason them out of it, but
what? Yes. What do you? Okay. See, you sit there. And
now Dillahunty, the Christian debater, when the Christian debater gets Dillahunty in a spot, he tilts his head sideways and goes, Now Dillahunty has had it.
Okay, let's try it. I don't value human life. Change my mind.
Okay, so now Dillahunty's going to pretend to take the legitimate only atheist position. See what happens.
Look at the Nazis. Look at that vision of humanity.
I don't care. I don't value human life. Change my mind.
At that point, this Christian apologist should say, welcome to atheism. This is what you're left with. See, Dillahunty's got so frustrated time and time again that this Christian apologist has really embarrassed him, left him speechless time and time again, that Dillahunty's like, fine. I'm going to take the obvious position you're trying to force on me. Now prove that God exists. Basically what he's saying. At that point, I would say, well, welcome to atheism. This is what you're left with. You don't value. There's no reason to value life.
you have yourself a humanity that has dignity. You might not believe it right now.
I don't. Change my mind.
And without God, without accepting what you already know is true, we can't convince you. But Scripture says that you do know that God exists. You're just suppressing the truth in your unrighteousness. He's asking to prove, for the Christian apologist to prove that God exists, but we don't have to, because everybody already knows that God exists.
I'm trying to change your mind by saying, without achievements, without attributes, without contributing a penny of money, without expending a calorie of effort.
I worry, by the way, that this is going to get cut as if this is really me saying this when it's not.
And I'm counseling you or something. Yeah, I'm your therapist.
I don't even understand why this point is remotely contentious.
What's your point here, though? That if you simply choose not to believe humans have value, then nothing that he's going to say is going to change your mind.
Right, telling me that there's a God or a Jesus, that's not going to necessarily change my mind any more than my line of reasoning.
So what's your point then, Glenn? Because
my point is that the changing of the mind is not the most important factor that's going on here. It's the
All right, let's skip ahead. The next clip I want to play.
brings us nicely to the end of the show. And I'm just going to ask that question one last time. Can atheism deliver a better world in your view, Matt?
I have no idea.
Okay. They're wrapping up the show. Justin Brierley asked the same question again. Hey, can atheism deliver a better world? Dillahunty says, I have no idea. What? This is what he said an hour and 15 minutes ago.
And this is why the simple answer to your question, which can atheism lead us to a better world? No, it can't.
Did he forget his answer? I guess this demonstrates that Dillahunty can change his position. Give one answer one day, another answer another day. Just ridiculous. That's funny. How is this a serious discussion at all? That's the question. If you subscribe to the atheistic position, the atheistic concept that there is no God, how can you take this seriously at all? Dillahunty is traveling all around the world, making hundreds of thousands of dollars, making a living, warring against the God that he knows exists, the God that all of you know exists. And how can you look at this and say, wow, Matt did a good job. He did you guys got a different idea of what handling a conversation well, winning a debate, making logical points. You've got a different concept than what if you could just make things up as you go, and if you could just subjectively say things with no foundation of truth, well, I guess he did do a good job. That's about all I'll do for this episode. This is episode 375 of the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast. If you appreciate what's been going on here and you want to support the network, please do so. Go to BibleThumpingWingnut.com and click on support our ministry. We actually need your help. And if you've been watching for any amount of time and appreciate this ministry and you never have become part of the support team, please consider doing that. And we will appreciate it very much. Till next time, everybody, take care and God bless.